an original.
From Story Studio Network.
I'm Tom Hoppe, and I'm your host of the Most Painful Podcast. On our last show, we spoke to Dr. Alexandra Perel-Winkler about inflammation burden. She discussed what inflammation is, some causes, and ways to reduce inflammation. So lots of great information, and if you missed this episode, you can listen to it on our Spotify and Apple feed. And if you want to receive notifications for the most up-to-date episodes, subscribe to the show. On this podcast, we've spoken about the importance of movement, exercise, and muscle strength. However, as we age, the body loses muscle mass, which could impact your chronic pain. So what is the best way to slow this process and to maintain muscle mass? Today, I'm joined by Dr. Sarah Vadeboncoeur, a naturopathic doctor, public speaker, and she also hosts a podcast called The Fatigue Fixer. Sarah, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. Well, we've had you on the show before. I think it was a great episode. And today, this is kind of an important topic, is it not?
It's a conversation I have every day in my office. So I'm very glad that you're having it on your show.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've read a lot and heard a lot about muscle mass and the importance of it. Maybe you can touch on that a little bit, why it's important.
Well, on a most basic level, our muscle mass and our muscle strength is what is going to allow us to literally move through and function in our day. So depending on what your activity or exercise or travel goals are, or even being able to sit on the floor with your children or your grandchildren, your muscle is what allows all of that to be possible. It's also really important for balance, which is something that as we age becomes very, very important, especially if we're trying to reduce the risk of falls. And muscle is also directly linked with bone density. Again, something that I never cared about until very recently, but now that I'm in my 40s and I'm learning so much about the changes that happen with both bone and muscle as we age, and especially for women through perimenopause, which we can talk more about, I want to do everything I can to keep my muscles and my bones strong so that I can be healthy as I age. There's also a really big connection between our muscle and our metabolic function. So when we look at our metabolic health and our ability to manage our weight, a huge part of that is something called our resting metabolic rate. So that's basically the number of calories you would burn, even if you were laying in bed all day sick. That's the basic number of calories your body burns in order to keep itself alive. The biggest determinant that we have control over that sets that basal metabolic rate is our lean muscle mass. So it's super important for that. And last but not least, muscle is so important for our ability to regulate and control blood sugar and insulin. So the example I always like to use, and I hope people will remember this reference, but I don't know if you remember the commercials for the paper towels where they're like these giant paper towel bounty people running around cleaning up spills. Okay.
Yeah, I remember that
So
one.
that's how I want people to think about their muscle. Your muscles are these giant sponges for sugar. And so the more muscle you have and the more you move and you use that muscle, the more your muscles are going to take up and use up that glucose, which really helps us to maintain a healthy blood sugar and is also very important for people who are pre-diabetic or diabetic to help keep their blood sugar in check.
Yeah, because you talk about metabolic health. So if I understand that correctly, that is everything from inflammation to blood sugar. And so muscles are helping in that. So they're kind of like a sink, right? To suck that glucose out.
Absolutely.
And so is it also true that if like leaner people who have less muscle, if they're not eating properly, do they have a higher chance of potentially becoming diabetic because they don't have anywhere for that glucose to go? Or is that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the less lean muscle tissue you have, generally the worse your blood sugar control is going to be. And I think we've all seen different examples of this, of people who can carry extra weight and theoretically or be considered obese, but actually have excellent blood sugar control. And conversely, people can appear very thin, but actually be what some people call skinny fat, which is a terrible term, but they look thin, but their body composition is still very high in fat mass and very low in muscle mass, which means they can still be quite metabolically unhealthy and at risk for, yes, inflammation, metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, diabetes, etc.
And is there also, like, when we talk about glucose, the muscle using glucose, if someone were to have, say, eat some carbohydrates, say for breakfast, they're going to have oatmeal, that kind of thing. Is there a time frame they should start exercising so that muscle's using glucose, or does that really matter? Is it getting used throughout the day?
As far as I know, and I'm not like an exercise performance expert, but as far as I know, I don't think the timing matters that much in terms of specifically when you want to exercise. But we do know that replenishing or having carbs to replenish some of those glycogen stores after exercise is a really important part of your ability to recover and be able to perform again.
Yeah. So when we talk about muscle mass, I guess too, like you said, the concern is when someone's aging, they're losing it. But it starts early in life, doesn't it?
In our 30s. Sorry to break it to you. Yes, I know. I was shocked. Yeah. So we start losing mass. For most of us, our peak kind of muscle and bone is going to peak in our 30s, and we can start losing as soon as that. After the age of 40, on average, people lose about 8% of their muscle mass per decade. And over the age of 70, you're losing up to 15%. And what that actually means in real life is that if you lose 10% of your muscle mass, you have a decrease in your immune function and you're more likely to get sick.
Oh, really? So say more about that.
Yeah. So again, our muscle is not just, an inert tissue. It's a metabolically active tissue. So you talked about inflammation. Our immune system is directly tied to our metabolic health. So when people are metabolically unhealthy, whether they have inflammation or poor blood sugar control, that has a direct impact on their immune function. So both their likelihood of getting sick, but also their ability to fight it. And, a perfect example is we know that people with diabetes have to be very careful with their feet, because if they get a wound, it may not heal and they may not even realize that there's something going on. But even for people who are not diabetic, this is something I screen for all the time. I ask people, if you cut yourself, how long does it take you to heal that? And if things are not healing well, that's not a great sign of your immune and your metabolic function. And that would be one of the ways that you might have a clue that this is something you want to look at.
Geez, you just gave me another idea for a podcast topic. Sarah,
great. Well, I'll just keep coming back. We'll make it a series.
There we go.
But so that's just 10%. If you lose 20% of your muscle mass, now you have muscle weakness. You have a reduced ability to participate in your daily living. You have a bigger risk of falling. 30% loss, you are now probably dealing with disability. You're going to have a hard time living independently. And again, if you get some kind of wound, you're going to have a really hard time healing that. And then 40% reduction in muscle mass, you are at a significantly increased risk of death from things like pneumonia and respiratory dysfunction.
Really?
So this is not just I want to look good in my clothing and I want to be able to throw a ball. It is literally your muscle mass determines what those last few years of your life are going to look like.
So this is why you hear people like Atia and that are really hammering this protein and muscle building, and because of what you're saying.
100%. And because we see, if you look around, sadly, and you look at people over the age of 70, what we see a lot of is people who are not able to live fully. They can't do all the activities they want. They can't travel the way that they want to. And a huge part of that is that they have lost so much of their muscle strength. It's not just the mass. So that's what's interesting, is that your muscle strength, which is your ability to move and shift things around, that's actually a better predictor of your health outcomes than your actual muscle mass. So I'm not talking about getting people to look like bodybuilders, but I'm talking about making sure that part of your fitness routine is really focused on keeping you strong. And that's your ability to lift and pull and move things.
Let's segue into that. If we're talking about muscle, so it's, of course, we always hear about the weight bearing and heavy weights, and maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah. So definitely when we look at wanting to build and maintain muscle mass, what the research shows is that especially as we get older, it is harder and harder to build and maintain muscle. So what we need to do is we need to look at different types of exercises that are taking the muscle essentially close to exhaustion. A different way to think about that is that let's say you're doing bicep curls. If you could still easily do probably 5 more bicep curls, you might want to pick up a heavier weight so that by the end of your set, I always say like you're grunting, you're making funny faces, and your arms, like you can't really do a lot more. We need to work to that level of muscle fatigue in order to really help preserve and build muscle. And sadly, as a woman, a lot of us have for so many years veered away from strength training because there is still this unnecessary fear that you're going to get bulky and that you're going to look too muscular. When in fact, we should have been worrying about the opposite. We should have been worrying about not being strong and muscular, but we were also worried about being bulky, that a lot of us haven't really started strength training often until we hit our 40s, which is great. But the sooner you start, the better. So especially for any of the women listening, please do not worry about getting bulky. You would have to quit your job and start exercising full time and eat a very specific diet in order to actually look muscular for most of us. It's hard to do. So please don't worry about that.
And like you said, it starts in your 30s that we start losing muscle mass, right? And it's amazing how fast it picks up. So we talked about some weight bearing. That's important. And I mean, you know, people can go to a personal trainer and they can get a specific routine that's for that. I don't think we'll get into that today. But after you work out, the nutrition is just as important, is it not?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the nutrition is really important. And I think one of the things that we're seeing is a greater conversation around protein, which I think is important and necessary. So when we look at, again, some of the things that are really important for helping you to build muscle strength and mass is going to be doing some kind of strength training and then making sure that you're getting enough protein in your diet. So when we look at protein intake, when we look at kind of the general requirements that have been recommended, on average, what we still see from our government authorities are on average 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. And that's really the bare minimum that you need to literally not have your muscles start falling apart. So that's like the bare minimum. What the research is showing is that if you really want to support muscle mass, because here's the other thing, as we get older, we actually need more protein because building muscle is more difficult as we age. And because of something called protein intolerance, which we can talk more about, our needs increase. So generally, where I encourage people to land is somewhere between 1.2 to 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram body weight. So if we take, for example, someone who weighs 170 pounds, that's going to look like 90 to 115 grams of protein in a day, which is totally doable through food. We can certainly chat about protein supplements. Those can be helpful. But a lot of us think that we need to, live off protein shakes to hit these protein goals. And for most of us, you can achieve this through nutrition. So that's one thing, is figure out what your daily protein goal is. Again, 1.2 to 1.5 grams per kilo. And then what I get my patients to do is I divvy that up 3 ways. And now we know approximately what we're aiming for in every single meal in terms of our protein goal. And I'll say one more thing. This is one of the reasons I don't love intermittent fasting, is that it makes it really hard to hit your protein goal. So if you're trying to eat 100 grams or more of protein and you're trying to do that in 2 meals a day, those are going to have to be very filling, robust meals. And for a lot of us, we just physically can't eat that much protein in one sitting. So that's why I'm a big fan of putting breakfast back in and making sure that that's a high protein breakfast.
Isn't there also like you have to, I think, is it around 24 to 28 grams of protein in a sitting to actually get the synthesis to start absorbing protein?
I'm not sure about that. I know there's been a lot of conversation around how much we can absorb and whether we can absorb high amounts. From what I've seen, there's no limit to what we can absorb. A lot of people feel like if you eat more than 30 or 40 grams, you won't absorb it. I haven't seen that, but I'm not sure about a minimum.
Yeah, because I was talking to another doc just offline, just having a chat about it. And their thought was, I think you had to have around 24 grams. And I haven't found that anywhere, but I mean, it's also, I try to think where this research was too, is that if you're at a vegetarian diet, so say, whatever, a gram of chickpeas is six grams of protein or whatever, we'll just use a fictitious number. Apparently the body only, because it's on the vegetarian side, only absorbs half of that, 50% of it.
Yeah, and that's where protein quality is really important. There's a scale that's used to kind of rate different proteins in terms of their ability, like their digestibility and our body's ability to take that protein and to synthesize muscle. And the kind of food that they use to compare everything else to is whey protein. So whey protein has a very high quality. When we look at some of the plant-based proteins, whether it's pea or rice, they don't score as high. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't be strong and healthy as a vegetarian without eating animal proteins, but you do need to be more mindful about the quantity and the quality of protein that you're having. And again, as people age, they are more likely to get something called protein intolerance, which again is this decreased ability to take protein from the diet and use it to synthesize muscle. And I know this is very stereotypical, but a lot of times I think when we think of like my grandma or older women, they're often having like toast and tea as their meal. Like there's literally no protein in some of these things. So it is really important, even though maybe your appetite is not as high, you really want to prioritize those high protein foods. You need them even more the older you get.
Yeah. I mean, I tried doing, I think it was 100 and some odd grams a day. That's hard to do. I mean, you think an egg is what's an egg? 6?
6.
Right.
I know.
So now that's 2 eggs is 12.
I know. It does take some thought. And once you kind of figure out where you can get it from, it's not that hard to do. But yes, it takes some like thought and effort, especially in the beginning, if you're not used to thinking about protein. To hit those numbers. And that's why most people are not getting anywhere in that 1.2 to 1.5. Most people are not overtly protein deficient, but a lot of us are not getting the amount we need, especially if our goal is to support metabolic health, muscle mass, bone health. You probably need a little bit more than you think. But on the other side, like I think protein has become such a talking point that people feel like they need to spend their whole days eating protein. Like it shouldn't be that difficult. It shouldn't take up your whole day just figuring out what to eat for protein.
Well, and I think my own feeling is I think it's become commercialized too. I mean, you have protein
100.
bars, you have this, but then you look at what the label says. Now you're getting into high sugar, you're getting into all this other stuff in that as well too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, you touched on protein shakes. So let's talk about that, whey protein being one of the better ones, and then the isolates. So maybe you can are you able to talk a little bit about that? Or
Yeah, of course. So protein shakes, I always say, are a tool. You don't have to use them, but if you're struggling to hit your protein goals through food alone, they're just a really helpful tool. In terms of what to look for, if you are okay with dairy, I would recommend a whey protein isolate for a few reasons. Number one, it's a better quality protein. Number two, in my opinion, it tastes a lot better and the texture is a lot more pleasing for me. But if you don't like whey or you can't have it or you prefer to avoid animal products, you can get a good vegan or plant-based protein powder. It's really about finding one that you enjoy the taste of. Some of the other supplements that are important is vitamin D. So we're recording this in January, which is peak vitamin D deficiency season. And this is something that I see all the time in my practice, and I test everyone's vitamin D. So many Canadians and anyone who lives in like a northern climate have vitamin D deficiency, and that can impair your ability to build muscle. So really important to get your vitamin D levels tested at least once a year. And again, especially if you live in a northern latitude, you probably need to supplement in the winter. And then the other one that comes up a lot is leucine. So leucine is an amino acid that's found in protein. And having enough leucine in your meals also appears to be really important. And one of the simple ways that you can do this through your nutrition again is to include some animal-based proteins, including whey protein, but also soy protein. and other animal-based proteins. So again, one of the benefits of using some animal proteins is that it can be a little bit easier to get leucine, which is, again, this amino acid that's really important for muscle.
What about, I just lost the word.
Creatine?
That's it.
Yeah, I love creatine. So creatine is great. It's something that I recommend to a lot of my patients. It's something that I take myself. And that's really great because it does seem to help with building lean muscle mass, especially when it's paired with strength training. But we're also learning that creatine seems to have other benefits. So there was some research that showed benefits in terms of improved cognition, which a lot of women, again, for the women going through perimenopause and menopause, are often suffering with brain fog, memory loss, mood changes. So creatine's really nice. And we still need more research, but there do appear to be some bone health benefits as well. So creatine is one I really love for anybody, but especially for women who are past their 30s, who are really wanting to focus on metabolic health and muscle mass. It's such an easy thing to add in. It doesn't taste like anything, and it stirs in pretty easily to, a water or something like that.
And like you said, there's been quite a bit of research done on creatine because there was this whole, fear it's going to damage your kidneys and all this kind of thing. And because it gets mixed up with other, I guess, supplements as well as other functions within the body. But yeah, like it's just been researched to death from what I'm reading. So it's a super safe supplement. I mean, it's been around for a very long time. And the more we learn about it, the more benefit there seemed to be. And just to touch on the kidney thing, this is also a lingering myth about eating a high protein diet, that it's hard on your kidneys. That also has been proven to be untrue. It's not hard on your kidneys. You're not going to damage yourself by eating a higher protein diet. And what about the research on the whey proteins? Now, I know the quality of course is important. And then there's all the other stuff, like they throw in vanilla flavor, they throw in all. But if we just took a plain isolate with nothing in it, is there research showing that is safe to be drinking on a daily basis? Or, is it just something you want to supplement once in a while? Or have you seen anything on that? Or
I haven't seen anything, but based on kind of the overall safety profile of protein, I don't see why having whey protein on a daily basis would pose any harm. I think it's fine to have it every day. Again, they've studied super high doses of protein and it doesn't seem to cause any issues. So yeah, if that is something that helps you hit your protein goals, to have it every day, go for it. If not, it can be something you use as needed.
And I want to know your thoughts on this too. I heard, as you said, when you age, get into your 60s and 70s, it's very critical to have your protein. But as you age too, if I understand this correctly, because there's always this link to that too much protein will cause cancer.
Yes.
I've heard that out there, right? Too much meat and that is not good. But as you get older, your rate of cancer actually slows. Is that true or no?
I'm not sure on that.
Yeah.
No, I feel for most cancers, it goes up. But again, we tend to have a very reductionistic view. And again, I'm not a cancer specialist, but we have this very reductionist view of this food is linked to this thing. And, when we look at cancer is very rarely caused by one thing. It's caused by a multitude of factors. And one of the things we know, a lot of people who are going through cancer treatments, one of the things that happens to them is they lose a shocking amount of weight and muscle. So being metabolically healthy, making sure your vitamin D levels are up, making sure you're strong and you're healthy will probably reduce your risk of getting sick, but also might have a huge impact on your outcome if you do happen to get sick, because you're going to have a stronger, higher muscle mass to get through that treatment.
And I mean, I've seen that with a friend who is super fit and, active and eating well and had cancer and bounced back very quickly, versus somebody else who I know that wasn't Latin and is still suffering to this day with after effects of it.
Yeah. If I can just say one more thing, specifically because women who are going through menopause, when we look at the 4 years that kind of surround a woman's last period, the amount of muscle and bone loss in that 4-year window is massive. So again, if you are heading towards perimenopause or menopause, or you've already gone through it, you're either about to lose a bunch of muscle or you already have lost a bunch of muscle. And so this is why it's so important to ideally start early to build that muscle mass so that you can help to reduce that loss, because it happens in a much more condensed window for women because of the hormonal changes of menopause.
Yeah, and for our audience, we've had Sarah on talking about menopause, so you can listen to that on season 5. Yeah, so I mean, and this, I guess, why we hear that exercise is the big magic pill, right?
It really is. I heard it said it's the pill that takes 30 minutes to swallow. And I think that's a great way, 30 minutes or more. I think it's like a great way to look at it. It is. There isn't anything I think that exercise doesn't benefit. So yeah, if you take one thing away from today, just finding a way to move your body and to build in some strength training, it will pay dividends for the rest of your life.
Yes, because our muscles support our skeleton structure. And if we have chronic pain and disc issues and that, it all helps with that if it's strong.
And our heart is a muscle, and our heart is the number one thing that's likely to kill us if we don't take good care of it.
Yeah. In closing, that's why stay fit, eat healthy, and listen to podcasts like this. Listen to Sarah on Sarah's podcast. Put a plug in for your podcast, Sarah.
Sure. My podcast is The Fatigue Fixer, and we explore the physical, mental, emotional, and societal reasons why so many women are so tired. And I'm on a mission to help women have more energy and fix their fatigue and just feel good. So if you want that, come find me at The Fatigue Fixer.
Well, Sarah, thanks for coming back on the show. It's always a pleasure to have you on. And for the audience, if you have any feedback about the show or more information on chronic pain, you can visit our website, veteranschronicpain.ca, or follow us on Facebook and X at Chronic Pain COE, and on Instagram at Chronic Pain _COE. Once again, Sarah, thanks for being on the show. And for everybody else, stay safe and keep the hope alive.
The Most Painful Podcast
is produced for the Chronic Pain Center of Excellence by Story Studio Network.